So if a bond is irredeemable, which is rare at this level, it's unlikely that you deal with this situation. But if the bond is irredeemable, the cost of such a bond after tax is found by the interest. You knock off the tax over the market value of the bond. For instance, we've got a bond here. We're told that this bond is what? Irredeemable. It pays interest of how much? 5%. And the market value of this bond is now 94.5 per 100. The tax relief is 30%. Required. Calculate the company's post-tax cost of debt. So how do you do that? Please take your calculators, all of you. Take your calculators. So the interest is 5% multiplied by 100. So that's the interest. And that gives you $5. Then 1 minus 30% over the market value, which is 94.5. So please, can you counter check and see if you're getting 3.7? Can you counter check? Could somebody confirm that for us?
It's correct.
It's correct. Okay, fine. So that is how we calculate the cost of the bond, which is irredeemable. The good news is that at your level, don't expect such a question. What if the bond is redeemable? If the bond is redeemable, what do? We do an internal rate of return of the bond price, the interest that you receive, and the redemption amount. So we do an internal rate of return computation. I'm sure you remember this formula where I need the two discount rates, B and A, two NPVs, P and N. You put them in the formula, you find your cost of debt. We have a company here whose coupon rate is 6%. The current market price is 89. The bond is redeemable at par in 5 years' time. Okay, so calculate the post-tax cost of debt, and here we have said that the answer is 6.94, and we have asked you to counter check. Why? This is basic financial management. That is the basic financial management. So using this formula there, we want you to calculate the internal rate of return, net of tax. It will give you 6.94. We want now to spend time on an advanced cost of debt. So what is it that we call advanced cost of debt? So advanced cost of debt involves the use of a method called credit spread. Now, this is our focus tonight. Our focus tonight is the approach called credit spread. This is a method of estimating the cost of debt, which we didn't cover in basic financial management. So in basic financial management, you didn't cover this method. But actually, what you notice is that this method is easier and faster than the internal rate of return. This approach is much faster and even easier. How does it work? The credit spread is the premium required by an investor in a corporate bond to compensate them for credit risk of the bond. The credit or default risk is the uncertainty surrounding a firm's ability to service its debts and obligations. This credit risk we're talking about can be defined as the risk borne by a lender or an investor that the borrower will default either on the interest payments, the repayment of the borrowing at the due date, or both. That's what this credit spread is. This is a measure of risk, default risk, on the interest and the final amount. Let us understand more this issue of default. How do we understand it? How do we understand that? The yield to a government bondholder is a compensation to the investor for foregoing consumption today and saving. So if you invest in a government bond, why are we giving you a return over and above your investment? That return reflects what? Foregone consumption and saving. However, corporate bondholders, if you invest in a bond of a company, we call you a corporate bondholder, should require compensation not only that you have foregone consumption, but also for the credit risk that they're exposed to. So therefore, if you invest in a bond, you as an investor, your yield is risk-free. On top of that, there's a credit spread, which is the default risk. The default risk. Now, what is our topic tonight? Our topic is the cost of debt, advanced cost of debt. What the investor requires is a yield, and that the same figure becomes a cost to us. Now, the question is, how do we calculate the credit risk? This credit risk, how do we calculate it? For this default risk, how do we ascertain objectively the default risk? The answer, the role of credit rating agencies. If a company wants to assess whether a firm that owes the money is likely to default, a key source of information is credit rating agency. These companies, they provide vital information on creditworthiness to potential investors, to regulators, and even to the firm itself. So this default risk, or the credit risk that we're talking about, we don't have to struggle because it's given to us. And in the questions, it's very much given to us. Assessment of creditworthiness. A large number of agencies can provide information on smaller firms. But for larger firms, credit assessments are usually carried out by one of the international credit rating agencies. The three largest international agencies are Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch. So when these firms come to rate a company, what do they look at? Now we've got a banker here. Let's benefit from the bankers that we have here on the forum. You people are bankers on the forum. How would you rate a customer when he submits an application? What are some of the things that you look at? Anyone who is a banker here can tell us what you look at when customers submit an application and you're trying to rate a customer. Mr. Mfwela?
You look at the credit rating of that customer.
So what affects the credit rating of a customer? What are some of the questions that you ask in your model?
So we'll ask the customer how he was managing the previous facilities, previous loan that he had from maybe some institution or from other institutions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So a lot of questions will be asked. What are your income levels? What are your expenses? What is your profession? What's the size of the family that you have? Are you a permanent employee, or are you a permanent pensionable employee? Are you a contract employee? So those questions that the banks are asking, they want to understand your creditworthiness and to know the level of risk attached to you. So what's the level of risk attached to you? In a similar way, when these rating agencies want to give you a rating, they're going to look at all those factors. The magnitude and the strength of the company's cash flows, the size of the debt relative to the asset value of the firm, the volatility of the firm's asset value, the length of time the debt has to run. So all these will be considered. After you have considered them, the credit rating agencies have come up with what we call what? Credit rating tables. Credit rating tables. Credit rating tables. These tables have been standardized so that we can use them to read the default risk. How? Let's look at this table. So, if a company has been rated to be AAA, and they have got a loan which is expiring 30 years from now, for a AAA company, their credit spread is 60 basis points. Basis points. 1 basis point is 0.001. Sixty basis points will be what? Zero, 0.060. This is 60 basis points. This is 60 basis points. In terms of a percentage, what percentage is this? So therefore, let us do our first computation and we go back to our question and we conclude it for today. The current return on a 10-year government bond is 4.2. So it means that the risk-free is at 4.2. Roger, a company rated out, I'm now back. Mr. Mfewa, was your hand up?
I think it was an error. I didn't take it. It
Okay.
was a legacy hand.
Okay, all right. So Roger, their rating is AA, and they have a 10-year bond in issue. Using the credit spread above, calculate the expected yield on Roger. So if Roger has got a bond which is expiring 10 years, this is the spread. Therefore, investors expect to be paid, investors would expect to be paid risk-free plus giving you 4.72. That's what investors expect to be paid. 4.2 plus the credit spread. To an investor, this is the expected rate of return. To a company, this is what we call our cost of debt. So our cost of debt will be 4.72. We just apply the tax factor. That's what we expect. Now, this is a very long story, but this is what we needed for the second part of our question. Yes, I sympathize with you. It's a long route, but that's what we are looking for us to do what? To proceed. So then, let us now go back to our question. Having considered the concept of the credit spread, where it comes from, having considered the role of the international rating agencies, we are now in a position to apply the information. So then, the cost of debt of the company can be found as you take the risk-free plus the credit spread. So we take this, then you bring in 1 minus t. So as far as the advanced cost of capital is concerned, as far as the topic, your topic is concerned, advanced cost of capital. What makes advanced cost of capital is the aspect of advanced cost of debt. And advanced cost of debt involves the use of this formula here. That's all, people. So now we're going to go back to the exam type question that we are doing and want to apply what we have learned. And that's the last item for today. So now let's go. Let us go. We are now not surprised. In terms of what? In terms of the language. What language? Let's look at the language. The bonds. Let's look at the language. The bonds are redeemable in 4 years' time at the face value. For the purpose of estimating the cost of capital, it can be assumed that the debt beta is 0. However, the 4-year credit spread over the risk-free rate of return is 60 basis points for a rating of A2, 90 basis points for a rating of Ba2, and 240 basis points for a rating of Ca3. Now we are looking at the current situation. So what is the current rating of the company? What is the current rating of this company to enable us to conclude our work for tonight? We come back here. They are telling us a story about the first director. And the story goes or concludes by, it is estimated that if this amount of debt is raised, then M, credit rating will worsen to Ca3 from Ba2. I've missed it, it's here. It is estimated that as a result of this, Murada Company's credit rating will improve from Ba2 to A2. So where are we currently then? Where are we currently then? We're on Ba2. The first proposal, there will be an improvement. The second proposal, there will be a drop. But from where? From Ba2. So then, let us estimate the current cost of debt using the credit spreads. Where are the spreads? The spreads are given here. For Ba2, what is the spread for Ba2? That's where we are. So for Ba2, your credit spread is 90 basis points. In terms of the percentage, remember 90 basis points. If I wrote it, it's this is 90 basis points. In terms of the percentage, that is 0.9%. That's 0.9%. So with that in mind now, let us come back and conclude or end for today. There we are. So we've got the information, Ba2, the risk-free. So you can now conclude, you can say, okay, so our cost of debt, is, there we are, cost of debt, that's the formula there. The risk-free is here. The rating is there. The credit spread is 0.9. The tax rate is 20%. So this is our cost of debt. That's the cost of debt. As I have said earlier on, the repetition may not be necessary. Like repeating it this way may not be necessary. In the exam, you can go here and just give your answer. You simply say, this is equals 3.8 times, you open your bracket. 3.8 plus 0.9. Bracket 1 minus 0.2, that's 0.8. And we bracket that and bracket this. Yes, 3.76. When the marker comes, he has no issues with you. When the marker comes, he has no issues with you. What he'll do is he'll put his cursor there. So in the exam, it may not be necessary for us to repeat that. That is just for teaching purposes. Even this may not be necessary. Of course, for keeping your data, that may be necessary, that may be necessary, that may be necessary. So this is how we calculate cost of debt using the advanced cost of debt formula. Are there any questions on the items covered so far? So what have we covered this evening? We have reminded ourselves of how to calculate the cost of equity and also the advanced cost of debt. In the next class, we want to look at the work of this situation, and afterwards, we want to look at the advanced cost of equity. So today we haven't covered the advanced cost of equity. In our next class, we want to zero in on the advanced cost of equity using the same question. Okay, to me, we have set up the pace. The pace has been set up. So in the next class now, we run. So what do I want you to do before the next class? But some of you didn't have enough time to read through the question. Go back and read through the question. Some of you didn't have enough time to read through the question. Go back and read through this question. Read through it, because my understanding in the next class is that everybody has gone through the question, you have made your notes, you have done everything, and all we do now is run through the rest of the parts of the question. Okay, B1, B2, and all that. Are there any questions on what I've addressed today? Are there any questions on what we have addressed today? Okay. If there's no question, we see you people on Thursday. Remember, our time is 20:30, and the login details will always remain the same. The login details will always remain the same, will not change throughout our program. We'll be using the same login details. Okay, so I'm going to post what we have covered today so that you can have time to go through it. Good night, all of you.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.